What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Good Wolf Project. I'm your host, Jerry Scarlato, and today's conversation is with Ray Doustdar. Ray is the CEO and founder of BUICED Liquid Vitamins, as well as the host of the podcast Deep Shallow Dive, and author of the book of the same name, in which he writes about the four pillars of his methodology: self-awareness, resilience, authenticity, and empathy, all of which we discuss in depth in this conversation. We talk about why self-awareness is important, why it's important so that you don't fool yourself into thinking that reality is a certain way when it is actually a different way, how to use resilience in everyday life so that you are resilient to the obstacles that come up against you, why being authentic to yourself and to the world is the best strategy for getting the most out of the world, and then how to be empathetic to other humans, something that seems to be lost in our society today. We all have different views on things, and yet for some reason we can't understand that we all have different views on things, and we're all humans. So being empathetic to others is terribly important. Before we jump into that episode, of course, I'll encourage you to pause, go and give us a quick review, or if you're on YouTube, to hit that subscribe button. Remember, the more reviews and subscribers that we have, the more we reach. And that is the most important part. And all of this is reaching more people so that more people can get the word, wake up, be more self-aware, have more empathy, have more resilience, and be more authentic with themselves. Now get that pen and paper out and enjoy this conversation with Ray Doustdar. Ray, good to talk to you now that we've already talked for 20 minutes. Let's see if we can find something else to talk about. But at any rate, I was curious that the name of your show is Deep Shallow Dive. The name of your show and the name of your book
That's
is
right.
Deep Shallow Dive. So where's the name Deep Shallow Dive come from?
First of all, yeah, we should have hit record 20 minutes ago.
We
We
should,
we we lost a lot of good info. But listen, it all started for me, and I can't even believe it was 4 years ago. But it all started. Remember that Friday? It was like Friday, March 13th, 2020. Now I don't know how drastic it was in the Midwest, but I'm in California, and I remember it was either Trump or Fauci or somebody said, "Hey, if you could, stay in the house this weekend, try to limit your outdoor activity." And I literally remember that day being like, what? What are you talking about? Like stay in my house. Like, am I in the United States? Where am I? So that was very strange to me. And that day really did resonate with me. And so, this was the beginning of COVID and it was the beginning of all that stuff. And it just kind of woke me up a little bit. And when I say wake me up, it just caused me to sort of pay attention to what was going on. And then from there, as the year went on, as we got it, more into 2020 and even 2021, I really started just sharing things on really my social media. And it was primarily Instagram, Facebook, funny stories. I would try to bring humor, but humor that kind of had a meaning. Like, for example, in California, all these restaurants popped up that were in the parking lot, and they were like tented restaurants in the parking lot. So then I would say to myself, so it's okay to have dinner in a tented restaurant in the parking lot, but as soon as but we can't have the meal inside your restaurant. That stuff didn't make sense. And so literally one day I was like, this is crazy, man. This stuff is like, it's like I need to deep shallow dive into this stuff. And I don't even know why I said it like that, but really in my mind, I wanted to go deep because I wanted to understand it. But what I've realized is we live in this society where you kind of have to stay shallow or else it's overwhelming. And then the dive part was really about diving in and again, discovering more than anything what I think is the truth. So the brand Deep Shallow Dive literally was born organically from, quite frankly, what I was doing. I was deep, shallow diving into these situations. And then one day on Facebook, I had created like a funny caricature and I was like, new branding, Deep Shallow Dive. And that was April. That was April 6th of 2022. So for 2 years, I was just kind of doing it. April 6th of 2022 was when I took on the moniker Deep Shallow Dive. And then it just started resonating, man. It just started resonating. People are like, hey, you should DSD into this. You should DSD into that. And that DSD almost took on a little bit of a life of its own. And so I started doing that. I started deep, shallow diving into the Kennedy assassination. It's like, okay, what really happened with the Kennedy assassination? But I would also deep, shallow dive into like health and fitness related things, which I know you're big into. So I would deep, shallow dive into intermittent fasting. Does it really work? And then I would do intermittent fasting and I would, report the results back. So the deep, shallow dive was born out of really my own honest curiosity about getting into this stuff. And then that led to the podcast. People were like, hey, you should start a podcast. You should start a podcast. And finally, in August, actually September of 2023, I started a podcast, Deep Shallow Dive. And so, similar to you, I'm trying to, more than anything, I'm just trying to get people to think for themselves and to get people to take in the data from various things and then decide, what they make sense. So that's the podcast. And then from there, I mean, this was kind of funny. It was like I kept on thinking, like, God, I've always wanted to write a book. I really have. I've always wanted to write a book about something. Prior to COVID, my liquid vitamin business, I had gotten that product into Walmart, which was quite an accomplishment. And so I was going to write this book from zero to Walmart because literally I started the liquid vitamin business in my kitchen with zero. And then I got it into Walmart, which was amazing. Unfortunately, COVID, all the supply chain issues, I got discontinued out of Walmart, which is fine. So that book kind of went away. But then this deep, shallow dive mentality, I was like, you know what? I want to deep, shallow dive more into myself, and I want people to deep, shallow dive into themselves. And so the book ended up being called Deep Shallow Dive into You. And more than anything, it's just a blueprint on how to have a more authentic relationship with yourself across a variety of disciplines. So that is a long-winded, short answer to how the brand came about.
That's a great it's a great story though. It's always intriguing to hear where, something like that comes from, especially when it does have, I think that seems very purposeful to me, right? It's not like, Ray's fancy new way of thinking. It's not some
Yeah.
random but it seems very purposeful to me. So anytime I see that, I'm like, okay, there's got to be some sort of story behind it. It's funny as you're talking about um as you were talking about the COVID thing and the Friday of the COVID and so on and so forth, I'm like, my mind is like flashing back and like
Yeah.
thinking through all that time. I had the fitness studio then that I was talking about before. And of course we had to shut down for 3 months because we were, you don't want people to be getting in shape whenever they need to be healthy. So, um, we were shut down during that time, but man, I am like recollecting those moments when like we're seeing things, oh, we need to shut down. Maybe we don't need to shut down. Maybe we do, but we maybe just stay inside and so on and so forth. So it's funny when you brought that up, how my mind just like started to think about those things. And to be totally honest, I've always been, for the last 10, 15 years or so, I've been in personal development. So I've always been into thinking more deeply about myself. But that's when I really started to pay more attention to what's going on deeper in society, right?
Yeah.
That deep part of what's happening behind. You can never know what's happening behind the scenes, but actually starting to pay attention to what's going on in different aspects of society so that we don't fool ourselves into thinking that things are a certain way. And I think that
No, absolutely. And I think what happened with COVID was there ended up being two groups of people. Well, probably more than two. But one group was
two
a group
polarizing
that,
groups.
yeah, two polarizing groups. One group was the group that was like, listen to everything they say, wear a mask when you're in the car by yourself, go to bed with a mask on. I'm being a little facetious, but my point is there was one group that really kind of, let's say, hook, line, and sinker, followed all the rules. And you know what? Honestly, like, I don't fault people. I really don't, because I will tell you this, man, fear is a powerful thing. And when people are scared, they inherently look for somebody to tell them what to do. It's like, think about a hostage situation, or a situation where, God forbid, you're on a plane and something's happening, masks fall from the plane. You're immediately looking for the stewardess or the flight attendant to basically tell you what to do. So fear is incredibly powerful. So I think what happened was you had one group that was just, militant about following directions. And then you had another group that, well, there was definitely one group that got crazy extreme. I didn't fall into that category, and I don't think you did, but I fell into the category where I was like, okay, you know what? Why is it not okay to just ask some questions?
Mhm.
And more than anything, when you look at the timing of stuff, we're right back where we were 4 years ago with an election coming up. And so part of what, my goal is with the book, with the podcast, with anyone I even talk to, is just say, hey, listen, let's see if we can have some learnings on what took place in 2020, and let's just not let that happen again. Let's not let that happen again, because again, with hindsight now, it's become painfully clear that so many things were completely unnecessary. And so many businesses, yours, mine, I mean, hundreds of thousands of businesses suffered unneedlessly, and some never came back. Some absolutely never came back. So more than anything, I'm hoping people now are like, okay, you know what? Let me just look at these situations. Let me take, and I'll give you two examples. And this is with the recent debate. I don't know if you watched the debate on Thursday between Biden and Trump,
I was
but
sleeping.
yeah, there you go. Probably a good idea. But like, what I talked about the next day was kind of like rising up to 30,000 feet and looking at it and saying, hey, listen, if you're a huge Biden supporter, you honestly should be mad that they are making this elderly gentleman. I mean, he just looked awful. It was an embarrassment. I don't know how his wife, his family, and all of the supporters even let him be embarrassed like that. And then by the same token, if you're a big time Trump supporter, Trump didn't answer any of the questions. He really didn't. He really didn't. Like, I went back, I watched the debate, then I went item for item, because I recorded it on my episode, and I kind of analyzed the answers. And I realized, like, of the, 12 topics, 10 of them, he truly never gave an answer to. So if you're a big Trump supporter, you should want more out of him. You should say, hey, you know what? I love everything about you, Big D, but what's your answer to child care issues? What's your answer to the rising cost of child care? So part of what people need to do, and honestly, part of this whole deep, shallow dive mentality, is like, hey, I don't care who you support. I respect who you support. But like, deep, shallow dive into what they're actually saying. And my tagline is, call a spade a spade. And I really do try to live like that. Like, I try to call a spade on everybody, including myself. Like, I'll call a spade when I'm not doing something right, or when I've reacted in a way where then I think about it. And I am man enough to say, hey, you know what? I was wrong about that. I kind of screwed that up. But man, we're in a really interesting place right now. I think we're in a really interesting place, and obviously this election, and then what happens from here. I don't know, man. There's a lot of uncertainty in this world right now, and this country. Like, we're
Mm.
Man, I never remember the United States like this. It's like the divided states of America.
Well, so to a lot of your points, where it gets dangerous is an ideology. That's where it gets dangerous. And as an individual, when you start to tag a group as an ideology, in other words,
Yeah.
when you start to go, I'm a Democrat and I don't agree with Republicans, or I don't agree with those Trump supporters, or I don't agree with those Biden supporters, or whatever. And that's basically where we are as a society. It is tagging, grouping people together, saying that they believe in this ideology and that I am opposed to that group of people. The irony is that you agree with 90% of what they say. It is that you don't agree with 10% of what they say and you want to pay attention to the 10%. You don't
Yeah.
recognize that as a human being, you are actually closer to 99% the same as them, but it is because of that small fraction. And that's what and this is we can get into whatever controversy or whatever, but my belief is that's whenever you want to tear people apart or tear a society apart, tear a group apart, what you do is focus on the minutia. You focus on the
Absolutely.
small things and dig into the small things that make them different. And when you do that, or I'll say you dig down to the point where you find a point that makes them different. Now, in World War II in Nazi Germany, all Hitler had to say was Jews. He just had to say Jews. And they're like, oh, yeah, the Jews. They're the problem. But now today we have to get down into very minute. We have to talk about not only races, we have to talk about race and gender together and this and that. And we have to put people down into these groups. And those are the ones that we have to really pay attention to. And if you don't agree with this group or you don't agree with climate change or you don't agree with this thing, then, and I'm going down a rabbit hole at this point, but that's whenever you put ideologies together and you start to fight against the ideology, that's where it gets dangerous, and that's where
No,
society
absolutely.
is.
Absolutely. I mean, I honestly, and we don't have to talk all politics,
I
but I
know
think it's interesting.
we
And
are.
here's the thing though, it's like this is what's going on. So like sometimes when I hang out with friends and we start talking, like, I don't want to talk politics. I'm like, dude, that's fine. We don't have to talk politics, but like don't bury your head in the sand. You
Don't
know what I
pretend like
mean?
it ain't happening.
Don't pretend like it ain't happening because
Yeah,
it's affecting your life. And they're like, well, how's it affecting my life? I'm like, what did you pay in gas today? You know, look at, well, you've got golden handcuffs now with your house. You can't sell your house because you can't buy another one because the mortgage rate's
taxes.
so high.
How
Taxes.
much do you pay in taxes?
Exactly.
Not just income tax. How much do you pay in taxes per
Exactly.
year?
Exactly. And then from there, are you paying attention that 175 billion has been sent to Ukraine? Do you have an itemized list of what those expenditures have been? You know what I mean? Like all this stuff, I honestly think for the first time, a lot of Americans are kind of waking up to what's going on with their government because prior to this, it's been like my life is good. I'm chill. You know, I don't need to worry about it. I always make the saying, you know, I hate politics, said everyone, because everyone did hate politics and probably does. But now you need to pay attention a little because it is affecting your life. It absolutely is. And you know, you look at kind of what's going on in the world, and you brought up a couple things. You know, when you create division, when you create conflict, it causes that polarization of people. And then all of a sudden, while they're arguing over here, who knows what's going on over here? You know, I've researched these like omnibus spending packages that are like 8,000 pages long, and they drop them on the desk of all the people in Congress at 8 o'clock at night. And then there's a vote at 8 o'clock in the morning. I mean, give me a break. None of these people are reading 8,000 pages in 12 hours, nor is their staff. And then all of a sudden they're like a, you know, $900 billion package that includes so many things is passed under the guise of one big topic. You know what I mean? Like all that stuff. And again, I'm not saying get as detailed as maybe you and I do into that because if you don't have a podcast, you don't need to get as detailed. But don't act like it's not happening, and don't bury your head in the sand, and recognize kind of what's going on, because at the end of the day, it really does affect our lives. I mean, it absolutely affects your life, your livelihood, your income, your discretionary income, all of that stuff. And it's funny, when I started writing the book, it at first I was like, man, what do I really have to say about this? Because again, like, I don't want to just write a bunch of nonsense and say, "Oh, look at me, everybody, I published a book." So as I started getting into it, what I realized was that, like, these themes started, and I know it sounds cheesy, but these themes, and I call them pillars, they really started appearing to me. And the first one, and I live by this, is, self-awareness. Like, the concept of self-awareness, and just the fact that I was questioning whether I should write a book. It's like, dude, do you really have something worthwhile to say? I loved that, because I never take myself too seriously, and I am self-aware of who I am, where I maybe fit in society right now, where I want to go in society. I'm aware of all that stuff. And so, with self-awareness, and really just like checking myself as I was writing, it like made me stronger. It really did. And it made my writing stronger. And so, like, then all of a sudden I kept on using the word resilience, resilience, resilience. And so then I was like, man, there's really something about this concept of being resilient. And especially, like, for you and I, being able to bounce back from, the issues of COVID. Your health and fitness business, had COVID not happened, I mean, it would probably, you'd probably be very different, right? You'd have a different life. You may have never started a podcast. I guarantee you, had COVID not happened, I never would have started a podcast, and I never would have wrote the book, because I never would have gone down this path that I've gone down. Now, again, for better or for worse, it is what it is. But that resilience, like, I really, really believe that people are now realizing you have to be more resilient, and you have to be self-aware. You have to be resilient. And those two things, they lead to authenticity. Authenticity for me, like right now, I won't swear on your podcast, but I don't even F with people that I don't find authentic. Like, if I find somebody that's just a cornball, and I'm just like, dude, you are like, there's no authenticity to you. I don't even mess with those people anymore. I really don't. And I've cut a lot of them out of my life. And, even on social media, like, I've stopped following so many people that I'm like, what am I getting from this? I'm getting no value from the content you're giving me. I don't need to follow you, whether that's a celebrity or a friend. I mean, definitely the celebrities, I'm practically down to zero on those, besides maybe some UFC guys and some boxers who I think are great. But, like, that authenticity, like, that's really become, a pillar of my life, and that's a pillar of the book. And then the last one, and then I'll let you ask questions about this, is, empathy to me. Empathy to me is something that, I mean, I always thought I had empathy for people and all that. But now that I see what's going on in the world, and now that I see, the suffering that some people are enduring, and a lot of it right now came about with, what's taking place in Gaza. And that's just real talk. I mean, I don't care what side of that you fall on. I really don't. What I do care is, like, I don't like seeing the stuff with the children that I'm seeing on social media. That's not fake. It's real. I don't, the people that want to spin it in a fake direction, they don't have empathy. Like, again, I don't care what side you fall on. What I care about is being empathetic to other human beings. And so that really emerged, and honestly has really emerged in my life. So those four pillars kind of are the backbone of the book, and they're the backbone of, this concept of deep, shallow diving into you. Like, fundamentally, I just want you to get to know yourself better, and I want you to get authentic with yourself. And you don't really even need to share that with anybody. But I'm telling you, I don't know, it's a more fulfilling life. And for me, it's become a life of even more integrity. I've always thought I've had integrity. I've always tried to live with integrity. But now that I'm really embracing this mentality, I don't know, man. I feel better. I really do. I feel better about myself, and I don't even care if anyone else notices, but I notice, I notice. So
Well, and this isn't a popular thing to say in society today, but you're the most important person to notice, and you're the most important to care about. Not the only person to care about, but you are the most important person to care about, because if you don't have a high esteem of yourself, then I don't want to say the rest doesn't matter, but you're just going to have a much harder time getting through the rest of it.
no,
But
absolutely.
I certainly empathize with all of the pillars that you're saying. The authenticity one, especially, in all of them, especially I would say self-awareness is a good number one. But when you're talking about authenticity and getting rid of people in your life who aren't authentic, not that I've been as proactive about that part of it, but anybody that I've really um are drawn away from, it's that person that just feels like they need to try too hard, right?
Yeah.
So like in high school, the kid who wants to be part of the cool group and they're just trying too damn hard to be part of the cool group. They get, you can tell that they're acting too hard, they're trying to be too cool, whatever the thing is. And that happens in the adult world as well. Like someone who's just trying too hard to do something. And that's something that I definitely have been drawn away from. But being authentic is definitely tough at the same time, because at the same time, we're influenced by so many people around us. People want to pull us into 1,000 different directions. And unless you're self aware that that's happening, unless you're aware that people are trying to influence the way that you are and the way you interact with the world and what you believe about the world, then you may not have an easy enough time, or you may not have an easy time being fully authentic with yourself.
No,
But
it is, dude. It is. It is. Being authentic is incredibly hard,
it's tough.
especially because of social media. Like you don't see people posting on their Instagram, "Hey, check out these leftovers I ate tonight for dinner." You know what I mean? Like that's authentic. That's authentic. Taking a picture. I might start doing that. That's actually pretty funny. Like, hey, look at my leftovers. Amazing. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But instead, it's like, I'm at Mastro's. Oh, Mastro's never disappoints. It's like, dude, who cares? Who cares that you're having a steak? Good for you. Enjoy that steak. And what's funny? It's like this whole spiral of, and I try not to do that ever. I really don't. I try not to do that ever. Like if I'm at Mastro's, I want to be at Mastro's and I want to enjoy the steak and enjoy where I'm at instead of being there to capture that moment on social media. So unfortunately, this inherent desire, and again, I'll be totally, I'm guilty of it for sure, as everyone is. But once you become self-aware of it, then it allows you to check yourself a little bit more and ideally do it, either not do it or do it a lot less to get that authenticity. But man, I think I am going to post a picture of my leftovers. That'll be hilarious.
it would be funny.
Check
Um,
out this chicken breast I made yesterday, and I had extra, and
yeah,
I paired it with some hummus.
yeah, you start a new trend.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. But you know what? I know you're into the fitness stuff, and I know you post, fitness related things because I've looked at it. But what I love about that is, dude, that's authentic to you. I mean,
Mhm.
I look at you and I'm like, all right, this guy's in really good shape. Maybe he's in better shape than me. That's authentic. I will look at your content because you look better than I do. Well, I mean, debatable, but no, but my point is you're legit, dude. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so like I laugh when I see content that doesn't match the person delivering that content,
yeah.
and that's where I'm like, okay, there's no authenticity there. There's no self-awareness there. And so quite frankly, that's probably somebody that is not going to make my life better. You know what I mean? Or make my knowledge base better. So I don't know, man. I think people are definitely, maybe that novelty has worn off to an extent. And so people now, I'm finding people are looking for authentic people. They're looking for authentic voices. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why podcasts have gained so much in notoriety is because I don't trust what I see on CNN, and I don't trust what I see on Fox. You know what I mean? That's those two polarizing points. But then I listen to Joe Rogan. I listen to Tucker Carlson. I listen to Russell Brand. I listen to all these other people. Hopefully people listen to me. Hopefully they listen to you. And I'm finding authenticity in what those entities are delivering. And again, it's not that I agree with everything they say. There's certain Joe Rogan episodes I listen to, and I'm like, I don't really agree with that. But he's giving his authentic take. You know what I mean? Like I don't really feel like, unlike the mainstream media networks, which really are divided along partisan political lines, they're not trying to shape me into a narrative. The podcast host who has, bigger followings than they do, as long as they're authentic, I'm willing to hear them out. And I might agree with 80% of what they say. I might agree with 100% of what they say, but it's authentic. And again, I seriously, I've looked at your content and I've looked at the stuff you do, and I find it authentic to who you are. And it's just a matter of finding your audience. It's a matter of finding the people that want to be knowledgeable on the things that you're willing to put in the work. Because that's the other thing, man. People don't realize it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work having a podcast. It's a lot of work doing this. I think you put out three episodes a week. You were trying to, dude, that's a lot of work. People don't get that. And especially when it's original content, when it's with a guest, there's preparation involved in that. There's post-production involved in that. So anyway, man, keep doing what you're doing. Seriously, I really do applaud you.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. And we're on the same trajectory to a
Yeah,
degree. Not that we're doing the same content or distributing the same messages per se, although we're pretty much aligned on these four pillars, I will say. But yeah, I mean, we're on the same trajectory, man. I first of all, I definitely appreciate both you watching and consuming, and you saying that. It means a lot. But
absolutely.
most definitely, it's just, it's just, it goes back to the time that we're in. We're in this interesting spot where we have so many distractions in our lives, so many things that can pull our attention away, and so many things that we need to be paying attention to. Ironically, all those things that we need to be paying attention to have been there all along, but for some reason they've just been amplified somehow. And we just need to figure out how we can grab our attention, pull it back over here so that we can go, how do we start to make a change so that we can actually come together as a society instead of continue to divide ourselves? Ironically, the things that we have in our available to us that are supposed to be social in nature are actually doing the complete opposite. They're actually not always, not all the time, and there's plenty of, again, hopefully we're both putting out good quality content that's not trying to divide people, but a lot of it is just divisive, and it doesn't allow the person to think rationally, and it doesn't actually give them any kind of way, any reason to think. And I think that's really the problem, is so much of the content that is delivered doesn't give a person a reason to think. It's really just there for entertainment purposes, and that's all that it really is. And unless you decide to become self-aware
Yeah.
and to wake up and to recognize that you've fallen for this trap, and that, number one, it's okay. You're a human being. All human beings are fallible. But that you've fallen for the trap of social media that is there to entertain you. And instead of you using it, it's using you. And until you become self-aware and realize that that's happening, the world will always seem like it is against you. It will always seem like things aren't going your way. It'll always seem like you're not moving in the direction that you want to move. Even though you say you want to accomplish things in life, even though you say you want to do certain things that you say you want to do, when you're not self-aware and when you're not awake and privy to what's holding you back, and the fact that there's plenty of things that you're not doing to do what you want to do, it'll always feel that way. So
No, it
that's
it will. It will.
that's
It
why that
will.
self-awareness is so important.
It is. It totally is. And it's like, I will say, I do see I think people, here's the other thing that's a challenge. It's like when you say like, oh shit, sorry. I think this, all right, sorry about that. When you say, even when you say wait, oh, I'm awake, it woke me up. That term is like taken on a goofy connotation of its own. Like for me, when people say what's changed with you, I say, I'm just paying attention. I'm really paying attention. And again, whether you watch the debate or didn't watch the debate, it's like I'm sure you've seen highlights from it. You've seen, things that have come from it. So to me, this is funny. I had this kind of epiphany the other day where I was like, there's no way the people that are in Biden's camp, like his performance was not a surprise to them. I've spent time around elderly people, and so it's not a surprise the way they act once I've spent time because I know that's where they are in life. And so with him, the fact that like all these Democratic, what seemed like people close to him were like so surprised. I'm like, dude, how could you be surprised? If you spend time with him, you know where he's at. And again, I don't even like to criticize his health anymore because he's just an elderly man now at this point. So what if you're truly being authentic with the world, especially these people that are getting interviewed, people should not be acting all surprised as if like, oh my God, this was the first time I've ever seen him like that. That's not the case at all. But people are starting to they're starting to call people out on this stuff. They are starting to call people out on this stuff. And so social media with as much negative stuff, and I do think a lot of it is negative. Like what I talked about earlier, people put their best foot forward, and it's somebody described it as like their highlight reel. And it kind of is that. It's like the highlight reel. It's not the challenging stuff. It's not people aren't going on and really sharing the low light reel. It's the highlight reel. So that stuff causes expectations to be not what they should be. People are always living someone else's life. And again, I'm guilty of all this stuff. Like I can call a spade on myself to where like I'd be following some person. I'm like, man, why am I not doing what that person's doing? And I stopped doing that. I'm like, you know what? Let me focus on what I'm doing and let me do the best job of what I'm doing. And really, I poured all of that into the book. I mean, again, this isn't, I don't need this to be a hype session on the book by any means, but I will tell you, like, the feedback I've gotten so far is people are like, you know what? You made me get to know myself better. And that's all I'm trying to do, whether it's the book, whether it's the podcast, whether it's coming on your podcast. I just want people to get real with themselves and in a way get real with the world, because I honestly think we're just at the start of this. Like, I used to wake up thinking, oh, maybe today's the day it goes back to like 2015 and like everything's normal. There's never going to be that day. Like that day is gone. Things are different. Now you've got AI coming into the mix. And again, I love AI. I've embraced AI. I'm sure you use it for things with your podcast. It's made my workflow way more efficient. But obviously, there's a lot of fear and trepidation that comes with AI, especially if it's something that can take your job. Is AI going to steal my job and all that? And then quite frankly, all the BS and misinformation that can get created with AI. Now you're seeing videos, you're hearing audio that they're doing it as a joke a lot, but like, man, they've got it dialed in to where if you decide to spin it in a certain way, people aren't going to realize that's not really Trump talking, or that's not really Biden talking, or that's not really, XYZ person that, is now being targeted to an extent. Man, it's pretty incredible. So we're heading into this this state of a world where if you don't have some self-awareness, some resilience, I mean, it's cheesy, but man, it really comes down to these. It really does. If you're not authentic with yourself, and then if you're not able to sort of have empathy toward these other people and maybe the trials and tribulations that other people are coming, you're going to be fooled and you're going to be influenced, and you're going to end up being in a situation where you're not living your own truth. You're living someone else's truth. And that's really the underlying, I mean, that's like my life message these days. I'm like, dude, just live your truth. I don't even care what that is. And quite frankly, I don't even have to agree with it. But as long as you are certain of your feelings, of your thoughts, and as long as you are like, you know what? Yeah, these are my thoughts. I do think this way on these topics. Whether I agree with it or disagree with it, I love that.
Well, Richard Feynman said, he was a physicist, I think, from the 70s and 80s. He said, the goal is to not fool yourself, and you're the easiest one to fool. Going back to what you were saying, you're going to be fooled and you're going to be tricked into believing XYZ. You know, there's just so much truth to it. And unless you're willing to wake up, unless you're willing to be rational about things, unless you're willing to question things, and more importantly, question your current thoughts and beliefs, then it will always seem like something's against you. And that's why, in my mind, I thought a fifth pillar for you that would be great would be rational, which is the same as self-awareness, I think, to some
Yeah.
degree. And really, if you put them all together, it's kind of rationality in a pillar, four pillars, if you will. But as I was listening to some of your podcasts, I'm like, it really just comes down to rational thinking. It just comes
Yeah.
down to
Yeah.
being able to look at things from a critical degree and not judging things because you have this strong hold on a thought or an opinion or belief. It's being able to look at things and say, is that more true than what I currently believe? Or does that make sense? Or it's okay for this person to think whatever they think. I still disagree with what they're saying, but I can understand why they believe what they believe. So I think that rationality, really, that's what it's encompassing, is being able to look through the fog and to see what's going on so that you can
No,
be awake.
absolutely. And it really comes down to common sense. I mean, controversial topic, abortion. I don't care if you're pro-life or pro-choice. What I do care about is like the people that support the late term abortion, where like there's some people that support that after the baby's born. I'm like, who in their right mind could support that? I don't care if you're pro-life, I don't care if you're pro-choice. That's just wrong. And so like what I think needs to get reestablished is one, common sense, and two, right versus wrong, man. There is a right versus wrong. And at the end of the day, some issues, there's just a right versus wrong. Some issues are black and white, but most are being grayed, and they're being grayed out on purpose because again, when there's division, there's distraction. And when there's distraction, there's something going on in this direction that we have no idea about. So, more than anything, I mean, I just really hope people kind of take a slightly more active interest in their lives, in what's going on. And you don't have to deep shallow dive everything, but like dive in a little bit, like get a little curious at things. Like it honestly blows my mind that to this day there's no true clarity around the JFK assassination. This is a sitting president of the United States of America murdered in broad daylight. And like, again, I don't care what you believe, but there's still like no real clarity around that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, if you take the single bullet theory that Oswald acted alone, You're crazy. The bullet had to change directions 7 times and went through 10 different people and then ended up in pristine condition on the gurney at the hospital. How is that possible? You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
like all this stuff, all that stuff from the past, and again, like on the podcast, I do deep shallow dive into a lot of that stuff from the past. It's because it makes you realize what's happening now is not a new phenomenon. We're just now aware of what's going on. So take it back to 1963. Like there's craziness that's been happening for a long time, but people are now starting to kind of question everything, and that to me is a positive. I really do think that's a positive because you've got a layer of people that have taken advantage of people's lack of awareness to what's going on in the world, and I think those days are over. Whether you agree with a certain issue or not, like people are adamant about this stuff. They really are. And they're investigating it themselves, and they're becoming investigative journalists on their own, Social media, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, has literally created a world of investigative journalists where people are now going back and looking at 9/11 again. Okay, wait a minute. Did that really make sense? They're going back to like the Vietnam War. They're going back to like the 20-year war in Afghanistan, where after 20 years, we kicked out the Taliban. 20 years later, trillions of dollars, millions of deaths, we hand it right back to the Taliban. Like, how does that make any sense?
Yeah,
Oh, man.
most definitely.
There's
Uh,
a lot.
Plenty of rabbit holes to be able to go down, but I think we could sit here and talk forever,
Yeah.
but we're going to go ahead and cut it off because I know you got something to get to, brother, but
I know, man. I'm sorry. I double booked myself a
it's all
little
good.
today. I should have allotted more time for this, but I will make you this commitment if you want. I'd love to set up another one, maybe in a couple months, come back, give everybody an update on the book. We've got some other stuff that we're doing with the podcast. I'm also trying to create these, weekend events, which by the way, I'm going to totally invite you to come as a speaker. And so hopefully I can come back on and give everybody an update on all that stuff.
That sounds great, brother. We'll definitely make it happen. For now, if somebody wants to know more about the book or the podcast, where can they find it?
Yeah. So for the podcast, just look up Deep Shallow Dive. And by the way, first, I want them to listen to your podcast and then come to my podcast. And then for the book, it's available on Amazon.com. It's available on Barnes and Noble. Just search Deep Shallow Dive into you. You can also go to deepshallowdive.com. And if you want a signed copy of the book, you can buy the book directly off my website, and I will personalize that and sign it for you, not just with a signature, but with actually something meaningful if you are interested in that. But yeah, deepshallowdive.com. I'm on all the social medias. And again, man, my whole goal with this is just to get you to think, just to get you to think. We don't have to agree on everything. We can disagree or agree to disagree, shake hands, and have a beer. That's the world I want to get back to. It really is.
You and me both, brother. I think we're both on a similar mission, man. Ray, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming on, and I look forward
Thanks,
to next
Jerry.
time.
You got it. Sounds good. All right. Take care.